This is Avatar, Frontiers of Pandora. We're here on Xbox Series X, taking a look at this massive and generally gorgeous open world experience that brings you the world of Pandora to your gaming experience. It is probably, I will say with a decent level of confidence, the best looking current gen game we have available. It is remarkably stunning, and it's essentially Far Cry, but Avatar minus the fun of the Far Cry series. And we'll dive into that a little bit later on. So this game really is just remarkably stunning. You could, if you love the visuals of this, and I'm hoping that Ubisoft actually does one of their educational tour type expansions like they do with Assassin's Creed, but for Avatar, because they really have done an incredibly detailed and intricate world that is very lively and just filled with incredible visual detail and cultural elements of the Na'vi. If you're really into Avatar, this is really cool. So the game has two different visual options that you can choose between, and an FOV option for those that like the FOV, so you would do that down here for field of view. You can also change elements of like when sprinting, and there's some autocomplete stuff if you're having challenges and whatnot, and difficulty settings, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. But we've got favorite performance, and we've got favorite quality. So we turn on favorite quality, and like, okay, so what we're getting here is it's dynamic 4K resolution scaling. So quality mode is like your full 4K, like it's beautiful, like it really is, like the trees are just really detailed, the volumetric clouds, they look incredible. Like this is your full, oh wow, this game can look really amazing. Like this, it's just kind of stunning to take in. It's beautiful. So there we go. This is at 30 FPS though. I wouldn't necessarily recommend this because this is an action game, but if you're just walking around and you just want the game to look beautiful, like, just give this mode a whirl, because yeah, it's stunning. So the game also features ray traced global illumination and reflections. So you're not really going to run into a lot of scenarios where there's I think those types of reflections, if that makes sense, like there's some bases and human stuff, but yeah, so it's kind of more, you're sacrificing kind of the performance level for better quality. So now the performance mode is like, it's very dynamic resolution scaling compared to the, I guess you would say the full 4K, but it still looks incredibly sharp, it looks incredibly detailed. It's really visually impressive, and you get 60 FPS. Now with that, it's not a solid 60 FPS, but most of the time it is. It's just some scenarios where the action gets a little intense, or some areas, or basically whenever you're leaving bases and the game's doing a bit of loading, that's when you start to notice the kind of performance dipping a bit. But yeah, that's kind of the technical elements. There's HDR support, there's cooperative play for 2 online, spatial sound support, and just a host of differing things that you can do within this game. It is wildly expansive, it is long, and it is filled to the brim with content. So if you like this type of game, there is a lot you can do in this type of game. Like, you could just walk around for hours, because that's honestly a lot of the game is sort of just wandering around. It's a bit of a slog. It's honestly really quite boring at times. So it's either boring, or for me it was strangely way too difficult, and I think that's because they continue to do this stuff where it's like, it's the typical sort of Ubisoft, you have to grind out armor and find items in order to be able to fight enemies kind of thing. I think that's maybe where I went a bit wrong with this one, because I found it just brutally difficult, even on like turning it to easy like late in the game just to try to get it done. And it was just, Oh, it was absolutely ridiculously hardcore. And I think that's the thing of this one, is like if you want a world where you kind of like sit there and you meander and you take an avatar and you know, hunt animals and you free the land and you take in like the culture of the region and you know, you get all the emotional elements of this one. Like it definitely makes sense from that perspective. Like it's a very filled world. It kind of we'll talk about this a bit more in the story aspect of it. Kind of showing off the loading here. It's actually pretty quick considering, you know, you go across this massive pushing the limits of our technology for console kind of game. And you're like an entirely new area. So I have it set up where I've got like this quest kind of set up in a situation where we can kind of show off a bit of action. But we'll talk about the story a little bit more in a bit. But yeah, to me, it kind of feels like they sculpted this world and then kind of added quests to it afterwards, which is really, really weird. It's honestly really, really bizarre. Because I think the game also doesn't really know what it fully wants to be. Like, it's a shooter, and I don't normally struggle with shooters because, like, first-person shooters are my, you know, bread and butter. It's what I do, really, honestly. I play a variety of games, but I love shooters. That's, yeah, again, that's kind of my thing. But, like, yeah, it's, like, partially a shooter game, but it's also, like, a survival game because you're constantly needing to, like, eat food in order to keep your stamina levels going, and then it's also like a cultural thing, and then story-wise, there's like a lot of, you know, stuff you got to do. No, I wanted I wanted to ride the creature. Why did it move off like that? And it's like, yeah, if you, it's kind of like the movies in the sense that like it's eye candy, but the gameplay is lacking the substance that makes it really interesting. And it's to me, that's kind of like what the movies are, is like, you know, it's eye candy, it's beautiful, but like, it's not necessarily mind-blowing in its like narrative direction. And that's, again, where this game kind of falters too, is from a story structuring standpoint, it's a bit weird. So first of all, it's essentially like, the game is very, I don't know if tree-hugging is the phrase to use, but like, you know, and there's some pop-in, but honestly, the pop-in isn't too bad, and it's like on horseback, or sometimes flying, or sometimes running around like a far distance, but the pop-in is really not too bad. He just wanted to kind of cover that in case you're being like, oh, look at the grass appearing. It's like, yeah, it's not that big of a deal, honestly, in this one. They do hide it for the most part pretty well. So the game is, yeah, it's tree-hugging, where it's kind of like, humans are bad, humans are terrible. And, you know, it's like, its messaging is like really, really like, I don't know if aggressive is the word, but it's constantly, it's just like, it wants you to feel bad as a human, being a human, because the humans are terrible and you're destroying the environment and you're awful. That's like a lot of what the game is. And then it's kind of like a light touch on trying to go on about like residential schools in Canada. Seriously, that, and it may be other places, I don't, to me, you know, based on where I am, and like even going into a bit of my culture and stuff, being here in Canada and actually having that connection to that sort of thing, it was a little, I don't know if heavy-handed, or it just like, it wasn't really touched upon in like it's very, very heavy source material, and like they do it to kind of make you feel for like the kids and stuff, because the Navi here essentially are in like residential, like a residential school, and dealing with the trauma of it. But like that's kind of like a backbone kind of thing to like you wandering around enjoying the beautiful world. And I would maybe suggest, and I haven't really had time to go in through the female perspective, but I would, because you get to choose the gender kind of thing at the beginning or whatever. I didn't love the male performance of the character, because you're like a boy, basically. Like a boy child dealing with like heavy, mature killing and stuff, and it felt really tonally weird. So I would maybe suggest the female perspective, and then, you know, and yeah, I'd love to hear people's perspectives if they gave that a whirl, because I was kind of sitting there being like, oh, I don't know which I should go for, and I just like to kind of give a warning there on the story too. But that's another thing too, is like you're playing as like kids that are still kids, but you're going around like massacring like humans and stuff, and it's really kind of like weird. It's not uncomfortable in the sense like, oh, I really feel connected to like what they're trying to tell, but I was just like, I don't know if they fully handled the grace element of like the residential school, like the material, as well as it possibly could have been handled, if that makes sense. Like I don't, like I'm not really one that's gonna like, you necessarily dive really hardcore into that, because that's not really what my review stuff is all focused on in that. But for this one, it was just like, since there is a bit of connection there, I was a little like slightly not totally into what they were doing with that storyline. Like I thought it could have been a little bit better handled. And yeah, that's just kind of my thoughts on that. And then the story itself, honestly, oh, I'm completely out of that lacrosse stick ability. The story itself is a little bit weird. I'm gonna die here. The enemies, they have like such auto aim. Okay, let's briefly talk about that first before going on to the story a bit more. So the game's like enemy structuring is really weird. So first off, the detection of enemies, knowing where you are, is really random and off a lot of the time. The checkpoints in this game are poor to awful. They'll spawn you just randomly in places. They make you redo huge chunks. Sometimes they jump you ahead of the checkpoint you're at. And the difficulty, like I said, could be really brutal unless you spend, I guess, a ton of time collecting armor, because your character needs like specific armor. So I'm like, I guess I'm a 15 power armor. I don't know why like a shooter kind of game like this is so like proficient on you getting armor and then doing mods, but I can never craft anything because I never have items, and the game never gives you like tools or items. Like late game I started getting some stuff, but it was just like they really sort of expect you to just sit there and kind of like grind out like side activities and missions to collect stuff. Like it's a little weird. So I kind of played a lot more stealth than I'm used to. Now, the AI themselves are a little buggy too, because, as I said, the detection elements of it, but also, like, there was strictly points where the enemy was seeing me through walls, floors, and ceilings. So, like, one area I was doing, which was, like, you have to escape this area, you know, somehow they would notice me, and then they would be shooting at me, and I'd be in, like, another room, and they'd be shooting through the floors and the walls and killing me. And before you don't believe me, you can literally go and watch, because I streamed the whole thing, you can go watch, you know, me struggle with that, where it was basically like they literally were shooting at me through like areas where it wasn't even physically possible. Like I was literally in another area, like room, and they were just pelting me through the walls and insta-killing me. You just kind of die really fast, which makes sense because you're like a blue kind of alien creature and stuff, but like the difficulty and stuff like this game is in this game is really weird. And the other funny thing is, like, you save a place and then immediately like the pollution vanishes, nature recovers, everyone feels good, and you're like patting yourself on the back. I saved Pandora, I saved, because it is all just like basically you know, it's the director trying to tell you, it's like, you know, we're supposed to be more nature focused and everything humans do is terrible, even though you need resources. And even if the Na'vi, they went, you know, eventually through an industrial revolution and everything like that, which they would theoretically as species evolve, you know, they would do the same thing to their own planet. But you know, it's just, again, heavy-handed elements of this. And I get maybe I'm not the one perfect for like the messaging and stuff they're trying to do in these games, but just, yeah, it's just so weird to me. So let's, you know, that's just an example of like kind of the movement, the combat and stuff like that. You can do like hops and shoots, and I'm sure we'll go free some other area while I'm talking about stuff, because you know, obviously I want to show you more of the conflict in action and whatnot. But yeah, it's just sort of all feeds into the system, and then you've got like this group of quirky characters, and it's a whole thing where it's like, save the planet, but I want to hack the planet, right? You know, the movie Hackers. Anyways, doesn't matter. Just a little oldie reference for you there. So yeah, let's go back and talk about the story because now it fits in a bit more. So like I said, you're essentially, it's a residential school thing. These kids are dealing with problems, the trauma and stuff like that. And it's like, yeah, that's a good idea, but I think they did need to maybe dive into that a bit more or handle it in a way that's like more direct in what they're comparing to, because it is a bit kind of strange at times. And the story itself is very structured in like the weirdest way. So like you do the little area in the tutorial, and the tutorial is like a section, but if you leave the open world area of that open world, the game will like despawn you and reset you, and it's kind of weird because we're so used to open world games where you get freedom now. You do Zelda, you could just leave anywhere, right? You could just right off the bat, you could just go and do whatever you want. There's no restrictions. In this game, it's like, oh, what are you doing out there? You're not allowed to do that. And that's really weird. And then like you play a bit of it. I think it's like 5 hours or something. You shoot some stuff, you blow some stuff up, you save some things, and then you get this Ikran, which is your flying bird creature. And it's like, oh, it's this beautiful. It's my favorite part of the whole game. We did it as like a demo before the game even came out. I got to see this part where you get, this creature, and you step up these steps into the sky, and you're on these floating rocks and archipelago, and it's gorgeous. And the game itself, again, like this scene here, like it's beautiful, and day night weathering, everything like that, it's gorgeous, absolutely just visually stunning, every step of the way. But yeah, you go and you do this, and you get your bird, and then 20 minutes later they take your bird away because you go to this new area, which we're actually in now, which is like the second area. And in the second area, you are, it's like a windswept prairie, and then they give you your horse, but your horse is kind of like you only get a horse every so often. And like the excuse is, oh, your bird can't fly here, so they give you this really cool moment with this bird, and then they take it away. Shouldn't you be like getting the horse first, then the bird? And then yeah, you get a horse for 2 seconds, and then like all of a sudden you're back on your bird like after 10 minutes, and it's just like tonally it just doesn't make any sense. And you pair that with these missions that feel completely out of place and randomly put together, like very convoluted missions. Like sometimes you're literally just tuning like wind chimes, other times you're kind of talking to people, and then other times it's like, okay, we're in this really important thing, we need to save these people and go hunt a deer. And it's really strange. In the game itself, it doesn't tell you anything. So I chose the guided option. I chose the guided option in the game where it's like, it kind of tells you, I think where that is, guided. So it's supposed to tell you where locations and everything are, and there's exploration where you're supposed to figure it all out. But in the guided option, it literally did not tell me where anything was. I was really confused. Like there'd be times where it's like, okay, we need to go here, and I'd be like, okay, but where and doing what and what? And I was really like lost with a guided setting. I was like, where am I going? What am I doing? And then there was these like weird mystery things. So you're doing like you're a detective as the Navi for some reason. I don't know why you're a detective as the Navi. But like, yeah, you're like a detective character, and you have to piece these things together. And you're in small rooms, and for whatever reason, it like literally would not tell me where stuff was or how stuff is connected to stuff. And I would be sitting there for like 10-15 minutes in some of these areas being absolutely perplexed as to like what I was supposed to tie things together. Like they don't really tutorialize that at all. It's really, really strange because it's just like, okay, where am I going? What am I doing? And it's really, really bizarre when you're playing something where it is, you think a little bit more straightforward, and at times it is, but like you're not directionally given any sort of context into what is going on in the world. And it's really, really bizarre from my perspective that the gameplay would just kind of have you being like, it's like open-ended. It's cool. Like I don't need games to necessarily hold my hand, if that makes sense. Like you may think that's what I'm kind of getting to, is like, oh, I need like assistance to be able to do anything. That's not true. I can figure things out, but it has to be logical. And a lot of the time it felt very illogical. Same with like the environment. There's a lot of times where you kind of don't know where enemies are. Like they shoot at you because they know somehow exactly where you are every step of the way, but you don't know where they are. And there's no like visual indicator. So something like Horizon Forbidden West or Zero Dawn, I think does a really good job of like a world that is sort of like foreign, but and it's got much more distinct colorings. Like this game, everything just kind of like blends together. It's gorgeous. I love the look of it. It really is beautiful and pretty. I've mentioned that many times through, but like it's really hard to tell what is what. Like and there's only a few enemies, so it's like you fight mechs and you fight humans, and occasionally they have the flying vulture type things that the humans have, and that's it. There's animals to hunt, but like, yeah, that's literally like all you're doing over and over again. And these enemies, they're just kind of gray, but they blend in with the world. Like they're not even trying to do camo, right? They're not like they're camoed humans that are make them harder to kill. But like you literally just sometimes can't distinctly tell the difference between what you're shooting at, and I think this game could have used a little bit more style or coloring or some sort of color grading in regards to being like, clearly here is your enemies, or clearly the enemies, because they're boring gray, stick out of the environment more so you can shoot them, unless they are a type of enemy that's supposed to be more cleverly hidden, or you get what I mean, is the sense that it's supposed to be this distinction of being able to tell this from that, or where something is. And that was really difficult. So yeah, we saved nature. Everyone's happy again. We can all hold hands and fall in love, and that's all great. So yeah, that was a part two where just from a story perspective, it's a bit weird because it's so hard to distinctly kind of tell the differing things for here. It's very strange. Like I find that kind of bizarre that was kind of the focus, if that makes sense. Like I really was kind of confused because you'd be moving around, be like, what is this or what is that? And you just kind of feel lost as you're playing through this. And you do the same things in this game, feeding into that system. You kill the same enemies over and over and over again. And there's repetition in every game to some degree. But like this game, you literally, as I said, you're fighting like the same stuff, doing the same puzzles. There's a puzzle where you do your little hacking thing. And I don't know if I can bring it up right now. Yeah, this thing. And you like zoom in and you do like a puzzle where you move your little cursor around, and it's just kind of like the same kind of cursor. And you have this vision. This is your like Navi vision. My Navi senses are tingling. But like, yeah, and it's still like this weird sort of confusing element at times where you're like, where am I going? What am I doing? And it's strange because on a guided element of it, you assume you have some sort of element of knowing where you're going. Like even the environment at times, I can see a lot of people kind of getting stuck in places being like, where am I headed? What am I doing? And I don't think that's like a great gameplay design. And story-wise, like I've mentioned, it does seem to like kind of jump, if that makes sense. I've kind of mentioned that, where it sort of just jumps along from bit to bit from a narrative perspective and pacing. And you also don't really get to know your villain other than like, oh, they're tough and scary and they're someone from your youth. But I don't know, it just seems like the humans are like comically oversimplified in this universe. Like even the things they say when you're fighting them are like kind of silly, that they just seem to hate your existence and stuff. And it's bizarre, and I think you could have done a story like this really deep, if that makes sense, like really emotionally done and really intriguing from that perspective of like, fighting back or dealing with these harsh upbringings and the long, large and deep scars that sort of thing leaves. Because obviously, being in Canada, we've grown up learning extensively about the residential schools, and it's just like that element of it just doesn't seem fully realized here. Because it's like, is this a game that's supposed to be like fun, lighthearted, and easygoing, or is this a game where you're going over hardcore material? And I'm just really kind of confused at times, honestly. And I am kind of getting a little tired of the whole Ubisoft thing where you've got to like gather armor, and like this is a game where you really didn't need to be doing like hardcore role-playing armor gathering and stuff like that. It just really it really just didn't seem necessary to have that in this sort of thing. I was a little weirded out by it. Honestly, I just found it bizarre. So, like, from a story perspective, I wasn't blown away by the story, and it went on and on and on. And I'm okay if developers want to make smaller, tighter games again. That's fine by me. I don't get the sense of why this stuff needs to, like, be everlasting sometimes. Or maybe just give me the tools to be able to move through the story in a way that makes sense. Yeah, sometimes enemies and teammates kind of vanish randomly. It happens. It's a bit weird, but it happens, I guess. So, yeah, because it's like you're trying to gain XP, but you're not doing like a leveling in a traditional sense. It's really weird, this one, honestly. Because I sit here and I move through the world, I'm like, oh wow, this is like one of the most beautiful games, if maybe one of the most beautiful game I've ever played from like a visual and aesthetic standpoint. Like their art team obviously just went absolutely wild in this game. It's also a bit quiet audio-wise. I think I'll bump it up maybe so you can hear it better during the review. Like it'll be more fine-tunedly balanced, but yeah, it was really, really quiet a lot of the time. But yeah, I just kind of like I move through here, and it's gorgeous. Like you're on top of this place, and you get this full sense of traversal. And I almost maybe wish the game kind of was more focused on using this in an effective way, because it's like it's beautiful, but there's like not really substance behind it, and it really was just boring to play. Like a lot of it was genuinely just kind of like boring. Either I was getting like pummeled in the few minutes of combat that there is, or I was just kind of like wandering around. Because like if I'm here to do a story, I want to do the story. I want to engage with the narrative. I want to see the characters. I want to see how they react. I want to know what's happening. But if I'm doing something where I'm like just taking in the world, doing fun side missions and stuff, this is fine. I can sit here and I can kind of lay back and be like, wow, the trees and like the fauna, everything reacts to your presence. It's amazing. Like it is the type of open world that you sort of want, but almost at the same time it would have been cooler if this was like a tighter open world with a story that was a little bit more, in depth and interesting and engaging, and it's just kind of like was a bit of a pain to go through. But if you're into this world, you're into the styling of like, doing the hunting. It's a kind of little bit of Far Cry Primal almost, I guess you would say, minus a lot of the action. And if you love, the world of Avatar, I think you can really kind of appreciate what they've created here, right? Like it is technically super impressive. It is, from a gameplay perspective, a cool kind of world to visit. It's this alien planet that's simply stunning. That aspect can be really, really good for you. But I do think from a story perspective, I was left kind of like really unfulfilled, and I just wish it would have been a little bit more engaging and interesting. Because I think the potential to do something wild with Avatar is there, but I also maybe imagine to some degree there was maybe like limitations in what they're allowed to do with the IP and stuff like that, and in regards to like violence and whatnot. And I don't know. I've talked a lot about this game. I didn't really have fun playing it. I was kind of like really bummed out by how it all turned out because I had like such more high expectations for what this was. But I think if you kind of go in at it with like kind of minimal expectations and just more see it as like a hunting exploration type of game, I think you'll get a lot more out of it. You really take your time and you do side stuff and side activities and explore and interact with the world, you'll get more out of it too. It just like it really does depend on what you're kind of expecting for this sort of game. Is this something that you wanted to like kind of play from a story perspective and get an engaging thing? I don't think you're going to find that. But if you want to do like, convoluted missions, side stuff, kind of get lost in this world of Avatar, this one of like eye candy and visual treats, and really kind of see, I guess, what your console can actually do for the current generation, it's like, yeah, you're going to get that from this. And I'm really trying to say is like this game, it's kind of like it's different things for different people. Like I really had a rough time playing this. Like if you see my stream on it, like I really struggled getting this done. But I can also sit back and be like, oh, it's really beautiful, it's really great. I just wish it was more hitting the mark for me and what I kind of expected out of it or what I wanted out of it. But I could see some people sitting here and spending, I don't know, tens of hours just wandering around and enjoying that, and that very well could be the Avatar experience for you, but it wasn't a great one for me, and it felt really bloated. and never ending.